Hello, everybody. It is the 29th of January and we are live. Ray Abbott's in the house. Hello, Ray from Tippett Richardson. We've got Anna Potter from Michigan. We've got people coming in from all over the world. And I'm not surprised because it is such an important topic we are talking about today. And indeed, there's been so much news in the world in the last 7 days. So what a show we have lined up for you today. Today's show is called From Here to Maternity, and we're going to be talking about managing parental leave and global mobility. Now, as far as I know, and I must admit, I've kicked around this industry and the conference business in this industry for a long time. This is the first time, as far as I know, that any global mobility event has ever discussed parental leave. And it is such an important subject because, well, so many people in our industry take parental leave, obviously, but it's all about the person who's going on parental leave, the person who's doing the parental cover. And we've got three amazing guests with us on the show today. We've got Elaine Sedgwick, we've got Carl D'Souza, and we've got Sandeep Anand. And together we're going to look at maternity leave from all the angles, from the person who is going on maternity leave, the person who currently is on maternity leave, and the person who is covering the maternity or indeed the parental leave. So really important subject. You are going to love it. Now, everybody, you know how it works. Join in the conversation, write in the comments box, tell us who you are, where you are, what's going on in your world. We are live now. We are live on LinkedIn. We are live on YouTube, and we are also available on Spotify. So you can find us there. And of course, I know many of you do want your codes. You want your CPE codes. We have CPE codes from HRCI, from SHRM, and of course from ERC. These are the codes here. I'll leave them up there for a few moments so you can see those codes. And many thanks to our really good friends at Rocket Mortgage for giving us the HRCI and our SHRM codes, and to our really good friends at Worldwide ERC for giving us the GMS and the CRP codes. So that's that. What about next week? Well, next week we've got a really important show for you. It's called Revolutionizing Immigration Management. And we're going to be talking about some new technology that Benevo is launching, which helps you manage all those people who maybe aren't on program, but all those people who are just local hires, where maybe you've got spreadsheets where you've got, 10 different providers around the world who are doing immigration, and you want to sort of check them, keep an eye on it. You want to budget for what the cost is going to be. You want to make sure that you've got the renewals, you know what's going on. There's some great technology that we are launching, and we will be sharing with you all of that next week. Anyway, without further ado, let's find out what's been going on in the wonderful world of global mobility over the last 7 days. Let's roll the video and have a look, everybody. Here's what's been going on in our industry in the last 7 days. So there we have it. There's all our breaking news. There's loads of jobs out there, which is really exciting. So if you're looking for a job, looking for a new role, do make contact. If you've got a new role that you want to promote, then let us know and we'll make sure we share that next week. Also, congratulations to everyone who's been promoted, everyone who's got a new job. And if you've got some news you want to share with us, again, let us know and we'll make sure we publicize it. And of course, happy Chinese New Year to everybody. So great. I know lots of celebrations going on for that, which is wonderful. And talking about celebrations, of course, a big round of applause for our very own Julie Onslow Cole for being awarded the Freedom of the City of London. But let's find out a bit about that. And also, as ever, let's have our global immigration update with Julie Onslow Cole. So everybody, you know how it works. Hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button, and let's bring onto stage Julia Onslow Cole. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm a freedman. You're now a freeman or free woman.
That's right. Yeah.
So anyway, and I gather you have all sorts of exciting rights as a
well, actually, I think it's a myth, but you're supposed to be able to take sheep over London Bridge. So I don't think that's really true anymore. Well, certainly it's not true anymore, but I'm not sure if it was true anyway.
Right. Okay. Well, congratulations anyway. It's a fantastic honor. So, Julia, tell us, what are we going to be talking about today? And I'm guessing the US might have something to do with it.
Yeah. So I'm staying with the US because I had so many emails and texts about it. I think this is the most helpful thing to help people that are tuning in. An awful lot has happened in a week. I mean, I think that's one thing to say. I mean, I don't think anyone anticipated the speed of change that we're now seeing. I went to a very interesting event this morning with Peter Mandelson, who is being appointed as the US ambassador for the UK to Washington. And, he was talking about the very positive and warm phone call that there was on Sunday between the Prime Minister of the UK, Keir Starmer, and President Trump. And he was saying that the UK were really focusing in on the opportunities. And there were a lot of big companies at this meeting this morning. And many of them were saying, that there was a great excitement, particularly from US companies, and optimism about the new opportunities they would have for their growth strategy, and that, companies are rationally looking at what's happening and very quickly changing, global trade agreements, tariffs, as everyone's getting ready to see exactly what will happen on that front. But from the US, what you're seeing is a very clear strategy, America first. You're seeing a big focus on deregulation, which obviously is very attractive for inward investment, and this unraveling of barriers. So, many companies that are focused in the US that have, say, small manufacturing sites are definitely looking to expand those. We've already heard about some really good tax incentives that President Trump has announced for those companies that are producing things in the US and actually, paying tax in the US. And so, they are looking at this. At the same time, what I am telling clients is that, there's lots of other opportunities that their companies will be looking at. So, for example, the European Union, which, is likely to fare fairly badly on tariffs, they have been signing, as I said last week, the agreement with Mexico, the Mercosur agreement with a number of companies in Latin America. So there could well be opportunities for company in Latin America. And what that means from a global mobility perspective is really to sort of get behind your company's new growth strategy and really be prepared and ready to send people perhaps to countries that you didn't think of before.
Destination changing.
Yes. So I want to say that on the global side, and then I just want to say a couple of words on the US side. So, again, this back to the speed of which things are happening. So on Sunday, the Colombian government refused to allow the US to land planes with deportees. And then we heard that there was some kind of travel ban. I received lots of texts and emails right up in through the night. And it was very interesting because actually, although everyone was quite confused and concerned and thought that the travel ban concerned all Colombian citizens, in fact, when it transpired after a few hours, it only affected Colombian government officials. And then by the time that news was done, because some people were actually stopped from boarding planes, but they were government officials. So there's a lot of lessons to be learned. One, that things happen really quickly, so to be really aware that things are going to happen very fast. Two, allow the situation to develop just for a few hours, because if you jump in, things are not what they seem, and you need to really understand what's going on. And the other thing is that I think companies focus on visa class. So they think of their H-1Bs, their Ls. But I think what you need to be thinking more is the nationality of your people. So I think that's a very helpful tip. The second thing is that, what we've seen with the citizenship discussion is that they're sort of redefining the words and the terms of US law. And I think that's something that perhaps we didn't anticipate. Although, again, at the meeting I was at today, someone was saying, well, what President Trump's trying to do is he's trying to sort of push things in a certain way. He's saying, well, actually, I think this is the interpretation of the law. It'll end up in the Supreme Court, and then we'll find out what it is. So, maybe it's a different way of getting there. But I think that is quite a different route that we thought. And again, is something that, we need to all be aware of.
Do we have any idea how long these things take to get to the Supreme Court? I mean, when we'll say... Are we talking months or years?
Yes, I would say months. And the third thing is that immigration compliance is significant. But the key thing to think about is that it seems to be that the focus is on the individuals. I mean, it will be on the companies, but there is a big focus on the individuals. So already we've had cases where, there's question marks about whether people are carrying their correct paperwork to show their immigration status, and whether or not people have completed the right forms, like, their, for example, change of address. And I think it's very, very important. And I said that last time, just to make sure that people are very compliant, they're carrying all their documents they need to, that they're compliant with the terms of their visas. And then perhaps the last thing I just wanted to say is that because of all the changes that are happening with the government officials, a lot of people are having to come back to work full time. A lot of posts are actually being let go. This is going to affect processing time. So really expect everything to take a little longer.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Julia. It is an area, obviously, that we will be watching very, very carefully over the coming weeks and months. So many thanks, and once again, many congratulations. We now are going to move on, and we're moving from immigration to tax. And I'm super delighted that we have in the studio with us our guru from Vialto Partners, Julie Barron. So you know how it works. Hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button. Let's say a big, big thank you to Julie Onslow Cole, and welcome to our stage, Julie Barron. Julie, hey, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Really good, really good.
Good.
So, Julie, what are we talking about today?
Well, I thought I'd talk about some of the same things that Julia talked about. You know, we have a new president, obviously, so
Oh,
we have some changes coming. Yeah. I don't know.
don't
Big
think anyone
news in the US.
noticed.
Yeah. So one of the executive orders that came in on the first day was actually related to tax, which was not expected and is extremely unusual. So I don't know what's going to happen with this executive order, but basically it contained, there is a code section from the 1930s that says that if a country is unfairly taxing US companies, the US has the right to increase the tax rates on the citizens of that country. So it is section 891, and it says that basically you, Brian, if you are British and the US deems that the UK is taxing US companies unfairly, we can double your tax rate on US source income.
And
so
this is something that's never been used before.
It's never been used before. So he has asked a committee to investigate this and look around the world and see what countries might be unfairly taxing US companies and report back by April 1st. So more to come on this, but super interesting that he's invoking a rule from the 1930s that has never been used before.
April 1st. This is
April 1st.
Yeah.
April 1st. Yep.
Gotcha.
Yep. So more to come. And it is, but it's very interesting. I had never heard of the code section myself. So I had to go and look and say, what is he even talking about? So interesting. On the UK side, obviously, there's some new legislation coming in from the 6th of April for all of our non-domiciled people in the UK. And interestingly, in Davos, I guess that was last week now, the Chancellor of the Exchequer announced that there may be some changes to that rule because they are starting to see people leaving the UK, which I don't think would be a surprise to any of us. But it sounds like the rules that she was mentioning of changing are only for this temporary repatriation facility, where people who have been in the UK as a non-dom for many, many years can bring money into the UK and pay a lower tax charge on that. So it wasn't an overwhelming change to the rules, but she did mention that might change. So I think the initial comments were exciting, and then the detail in that wasn't so exciting. The other thing I wanted to bring up was part of the changes became with the Section 690, where employers can write to the government and say, hey, we want to reduce our expats withholding by a certain percentage, right? So I work 20% of my time outside the UK, so you only have to withhold on 80% of my salary. Well, it seems like there is a lot of devil in the details with that legislation. And so our teams are busy working with HMRC to understand what all that means. But employers should really be looking at this, because the way the rules are written right now, it seems that everyone will need to reapply for Section 690 agreements right at the 6th of April. And possibly you would have to reapply every year, so that you have to apply within the tax year and you have to reapply every year. So something to watch out for. Hopefully we'll get more clarity, and hopefully they can adjust the rules so that all of a sudden on the 6th of April, we aren't redoing everyone's agreements for this year.
Okay.
So we'll see, but it's kind of interesting.
It is. One last question. I've been hearing a lot about the people who are being moved aside within the US federal government. I was reading reports that up to 2 million people have been sort of, encouraged to resign.
Yes.
Is that applying to the IRS or?
Yeah, sure. The IRS is federal government workers. So there's a hiring freeze at the IRS. And so we will see. Trump, first of all, ordered all of federal government workers to go back to the office. That's interesting. My sister works for the federal government. She has not gone back to the office yet, but so we'll see about the timing of all that. But yeah, the IRS.
That will encourage a lot of people to resign of itself.
Well, I think that's the goal, right? They want people to resign, so that's easier than having to let them go and cheaper. So I think they're going to see who resigns if they're forced to come back to the office. But yes, absolutely, the IRS was hoping to hire a bunch of people and do more enforcement, and that's not going to happen.
Okay, so we can expect processing times to slow down, possibly,
or just stay slow, I guess. Hopefully they don't slow down even more.
Oh, okay. Anyway, we better move on.
Okay.
So, Julie, thank you so much for that tax update. So much happening in the last week.
Yeah.
We're now going to move on to Cara Butler from Benevo, who's going to be sharing some very exciting Benevo updates. So, everybody, you know how it works. Hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button. A big thank you to Julie Barron, and welcome to our stage, Cara Butler. I just realized I played the wrong video. So there we go. There we go. I played the wrong video. That's going to confuse everybody. Oh, dear. Anyway, Cara, great to see you. I know you're not Julie on So, Cara, what are you talking to us about today?
Hi, Brian. Hi, everybody. I've just got a couple of Benevo updates to share. First, if you're new to the show or to Benevo, we launched a new Benevo Immigration Management Hub. And what this is, it's really a new offering that's designed to transform the way the industry is managing sponsored workforces, or in other words, immigration-only cases that don't include a relocation case. So to bring visibility and control into the immigration process, all in one centralized platform. And we're going to learn more about that, as you said, next week in the show, right? But how it works is that the hub actually integrates with your existing immigration providers and HR systems to create a single source of truth for your immigration-only cases. So it's available as a standalone solution or as part of the complete Benevo platform. And if you'd like to learn more, Tally is going to be sharing the link now. But for our corporate attendees, we're hosting an in-depth webinar on February 11th that you can join. You can register now, and Tally is dropping that link as well. And then next, Benevo will be at the FEM's European Conference in Amsterdam on the 7th of March. And our one and only Beth Nielsen will be representing Benevo. And if you're attending, we'd love to connect with Beth while everyone is there.
It was a great event, and big shout out to everyone for that event.
Definitely. So send your email into the marketing team if you'd like to connect, and Tally, I think you'll be dropping that as well. Too. And then last but not least, we're conducting and in the middle of 2 benchmark surveys that we're running. The first one being a VIP mobility support benchmark, to determine what mobility benefits are being offered to VIPs. The next one is the a U.S. domestic and outbound home sale assistance to find out what kind of support companies are providing for the home sale support as well. And it's really not just a survey, Brian, it's really an interview experience with Russ Haney, who is our client and our client advisory team. So he's going to be asking a lot of questions. You'll get to interact, but also to contribute your insights and to gain valuable information about some other innovative solutions that other programs are using as well. So we'd love to have you join and be a part of that benchmark or both of those benchmarks. So let us know. You can reach out to Russ. The deadline to participate is February the 14th. So we'd love to have you join too.
Cool. So exciting stuff going on there. And thank you for all that. And everybody do tune in next week when we will be talking about the Immigration Hub. It's super exciting. But we're now going to be saying this is a world first for global mobility. This is the first time I think we've ever had a show discussing parental leave in our industry. And we've got not one, not two, but 3 amazing role models who are going to be talking about their personal experiences. So everybody, hit that heart button, hit that like button, hit that applause button, and let's welcome to our stage the wonderful Elaine Sedgwick, Carl D'Souza, and Sandeep Anand. Ladies, hello, welcome to the show. And as Natalie just posted, such an important topic. So we're going to dive straight into it. But before we do, actually, let's just get a bit of background. So I'm going to start with you, Kyle, because you, and we are super flattered that you are here. You're currently on maternity leave at this very moment. So tell us a bit about yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Ryan, for having me. I'm Kyle D'Souza. I'm the Director of Mobility and Immigration at Cisco Systems, the networking and big tech company, not to be confused with Cisco, the food distribution company. I am currently on my second maternity leave from Cisco. I'm 4.5 months into that. I will be out when all is said and done for roughly 6 months. So it has been interesting to have this be my second maternity leave. And also a second maternity leave under very different kind of terms and conditions, because my remit and my responsibilities have changed from the first time that I stepped away. So
you're
excited to be
there
here
with your little baby somewhere downstairs. Dad's looking after. Tell us about baby girl. What's her name?
So Elise was born in September, and she is 4.5 months old. I have Luke, who's 4 years old. He has now left the house and is on the way to daycare. I heard the garage go up, but baby is downstairs with my mom, and we are truly thankful for our village that comes to support us when I need to do things like this. So,
wow. Okay, so Kyle, that's just fantastic. Thank you for giving us your time. I won't make jokes about sleep deprivation, but actually I just did. But you're awake and with us. So okay, so Kyle, so you're with Cisco. You're currently on maternity leave at the moment. Now, Elaine, tell us about yourself, because you've done maternity cover a couple of times, haven't you? So tell us about your experiences.
I have. Hi, Brian. Thank you very much for hosting this discussion. I've actually been, I've covered maternity 3 times in my career, 3 times with different outcomes for different companies, most recently for Jaguar Landrover, where the individual came back from maternity leave, and I've recently left. So I have a lot of experience from that side of the experience of actually covering for that period of time.
And Sandeep, so you've done both, because you've been on maternity leave a couple of times, and you're currently doing maternity cover. So tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, kind of done both ends of it, which I know brings its own perspectives. But yeah, thank you guys for having me on here. Such an important topic. So yeah, I was the former director of mobility and travel at Shopify, and I'm currently covering a maternity leave, overseeing mobility at Airbnb. 2 times around maternity leave, where I went and had my baby, and now currently covering that for another lovely person who's taking care of their little one at the moment.
Okay, so there's so much to talk about. And to the audience, if you've got questions you want to ask, comments you want to make, then just shove them in the comments box, and we'll try and let the conversation go wherever it goes. But I'll try and do things maybe a little bit chronologically. I suppose the first thing is, you're pregnant, you're having a baby. At some point, you've actually got to tell your boss that this is happening and that you're going to be away, and you've got to find out what the paternity benefits are. You've got to work out what's going on. At what point is this an easy conversation, a difficult conversation? Obviously it's wonderful news, but it's wonderful news for you, but the organization might think, well, it's not quite so wonderful there, because, they're losing a valued member of staff for 6, 12, 18 months. Kyle, at what point did you sort of start thinking about how you're going to frame that conversation with the people at work?
So I've had to share maternity news twice now. The first time, I know we talked about this in the pre-show, first pregnancy, I waited a little bit to share anything. I think I was well past the first trimester before I shared anything with my direct manager. And we decided to keep it kind of to ourselves for an extended period of time, just given the work that I was focused on at that point. The second time, having been promoted into a bigger role with a wider team, I shared with my VP much sooner. And that was a personal choice. One, because I wanted to know that I had the support of my company should anything go wrong. That's also something that women are forced to consider in terms of, if unfortunately you suffer a miscarriage or you require extended time away to attend doctor's appointments, I wanted people to know what was going on. And so I shared a little earlier, but also I shared because every pregnancy is different. And my second pregnancy, I felt a lot sicker than I did my first. And there were times when I'd have to lay down horizontally on the bed in the middle of the day. And so I wanted people to should know what the reason was, if in case it was affecting my performance. And so I think the biggest takeaway that I would share is it's a very personal decision. It depends kind of on your personal circumstances. It depends on the work that you're currently doing, the structure of your team, and then just overall kind of how any sort of leave is viewed at the company that you're at.
Yeah, because you were telling me earlier that California is very good, that it has nesting leave. So tell us a bit about that, because other people may not know that as a concept.
So I don't claim to be kind of a legal expert on maternity leave in the United States. I will say that we have a long ways to go in the United States to ensure maternity leave, parental leave for working parents. But California is a little bit more progressive, and I am very thankful that I am in California and have been for this birth because I got 4 weeks of nesting leave, which is leave that you are offered by the state of California prior to the birth to nest. And so you take it 4 weeks prior. You cannot use it on the back end. You cannot add to your maternity leave once you've had the baby. It's something that you do before. And it's super helpful. From personal experience, it made the world of difference because with my eldest, I logged off and was in the hospital that very night. And so having 4 weeks to kind of potter around my house and fold baby clothes and do loads of laundry was really helpful.
I mean, that works well, obviously, if you know when the baby's coming, but babies don't always do what they're told. So what happens if the baby comes early? Do you just lose those weeks that you would have otherwise got?
Yes, you lose those weeks. It's a very ideal situation. And again, there's a lot of privilege to kind of there's a lot of privilege to having your baby come on time versus it being kind of an emergency early labor situation. So if you are in that position in California, you get that opportunity. I believe there's one other place in the United States that affords that, and it's Washington, D.C., but I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that.
Okay. So let's move on. Sandy, Carl was working for Cisco, which is a very large, mature company. You were working with Shopify, which was a much smaller company. And I'm guessing at the time when you took your first maternity leave, it was even smaller, the way these companies tend to grow. So what was it like then telling people when you're presumably in a much smaller team?
Yeah, I think size of company is one consideration, but I think, like to Kyle's point about all the nuanced things you need to consider, the culture of the company also, I think, breeds the comfort to inform either sooner or later. And then your own relationship with your manager, your team, and also the accountability you feel as a human. Just on, like for me in Ontario, Canada, had the opportunity to take up to 18 months. I chose to only take 12 months because I know myself, and by month end of 12, I'm like, let me get back to work and get back to adult chit chats. But all to say, I think there's all of these factors that afford that comfort level and the decision to either say it early or say it late. For myself, what really dictated my decision the first time around was, the raw emotions of, oh my God, I'm pregnant. Like, oh my God, this is scary. Is my baby healthy? When is the right medical supported time where it's in that safe zone? So I chose to wait until the first trimester was complete, where I could then inform. And I did it by way of, senior management to manager to team, just so that there was no news going around in the incorrect way. So you have to hold a professionalism in how you communicate it. And I also think you own your own journey, not only in your career, but also what your maternity leave process looks like as you leave, and also during it, and also after it. So what I mean by that is just taking accountability to take ownership of really prepping everybody, being part of finding your cover, making sure your offboarding notes are good, your transition notes are good, and that sort of stuff. The second time around, I'd say the professionalism stuck around for sure. My scope had triplicated, so I had a much broader portfolio under me, which meant the accountability and the impact of my leave just felt greater, still just as important, but a little bit greater in terms of the impact of it. And also, I think having done it the first time around, and women, you can attest to this, you show definitely a lot earlier the next time around. So I look like I was like 16 weeks pregnant, but I was only about 10 to 12. And so there's also this whole concept of I want to be the one to share the news, and the human element of I'm actually physically starting to look different. So why don't I just get out there and, caveat to say that I'm still in the first trimester, be very mindful of who I'm telling, because there are many times those unfortunate events take place. You pray and you hope for the best, but there's just those things you kind of have to work in parallel as a working professional who's getting prepared for this sort of next phase in life. So,
okay, so I want to bring Elaine in and flip the conversation now, looking at things from the other side of the coin. So, so the person who's the mother, the mother to be, is going off on maternity leave, parental leave, and she needs to recruit in a replacement, a cover. And that's where, Elaine, you've done maternity cover 3 times. What's it like? I mean, the first thing is you've got to have an interview, and you're having an interview with someone's job you're taking. And I suppose effectively, and people don't shoot me down if I'm using the wrong phrase here, but effectively, you're babysitting somebody's work baby when they're going off to have their human baby. So Elaine, what's it like going into that sort of situation? First of all, the interview and then the actual job.
I think great terminology, Brian, in the fact that you are, I guess, babysitting, steering the ship whilst that individual is away on maternity cover. The interview is interesting. It could be with the individual who's leaving, or perhaps their manager. I've had both situations. And there is that element of, I suppose, you are competitors with each other in the industry, in the area. So that is an interesting element. But if the company are recruiting externally, I think you've got to be confident as the candidate, as the external candidate, that you're not only bringing, a safe pair of hands, but you're also bringing a fresh perspective, a fresh pair of eyes. And I think the company should value that if they're recruiting externally for this period of time, that you can bring, an element of reviewing their processes and looking for efficiencies. I mean, it's difficult.
What is your job then? Are you for want of a better phrase, a supply teacher? You're just there to sort of hold the fort, or are you a change agent? I mean, would you actually look at making changes when you're going into this new organisation?
There's an element of both, and I think you can't be naive for someone who is providing the cover. I think there's definitely an element of being the supply teacher and perhaps not necessarily being welcomed by everyone in the team. That you need to be, I think, prepared for differing opinions, differing approaches, and certainly, for if you're coming in as a manager, that might not be the first manager they've seen in a space of a year. So it's you've got to really approach that with some delicacy. And yes, you are a change agent. You've got to come. You can't hold back really in terms of seeing efficiencies, improving processes. I mean, for example, in one position, I really focused during the time in partnering with the business and trying to change that relationship with business stakeholders to become more proactive as opposed to reactive. In another maternity cover that I did, I was really writing process flows and really going to the nuts and bolts and the nitty gritty of the actual processes. So I think you really have to bring, your value is your experience and, your fresh perspective. Yes, you're steering the ship, but you've got to steer it in the right direction. And so many things can change we all know, in such a short space of time.
I think maybe we'll get a bit more into that in a moment. Yeah. But I just want to flip it for a second, because we had a question come in from Ferzine. I'll start off with you, Sandeep, because and Ferzine's asked, how does one go about finding the temp positions to cover for people going on maternity leave in the maternity world? But then the other part of the question is which in some ways is more interesting, is the interview process any different? How big is there an overlap, if at all? So Now, I know that Sandeep and Carl, you've had very different experiences in terms of the replacements that you had, as opposed to getting in a permanent replacement rather than somebody, so in an external rather than internal replacement. But Sandeep, what's your perspective on that? How do you go about finding these positions? And then also, is the interview process different? What are you looking for when you're interviewing an external candidate to do your job, to babysit your job for, say, 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, I mean, you go through a real process of self-reflection about the role and also the future of the role, and like really understanding what has been like the gap, and where do you want those fresh eyes, and what type of skill set is needed. You really go through this period of deep self-reflection about just the vision of the team. And then also for myself, going for 12 to 18 months, like that is a long period of time. So going through the professional side of it, and also trying to really understand which way do you want that vision and change to take place. And to what's been said earlier there, you can't be naive to the fact that it's a long period of time, change will happen. And so you have to work with your leadership as well to make sure the vision of where that gap might land that role or that opportunity in the future needs to be aligned. And then you just go about it. Like for me, it was very much a similar job posting opportunity, because the length of time is so long. You are able to be competitive on the market, because at minimum it is a 12-month contract. So that gives somebody 1 year, if not up to a year and a half. And sometimes that period of time ideally would have crossover. So for my first one, I did have about 4 to 5 weeks of crossover on the front end, really, because the apprehension was making sure the handover takes place in the right way. And you feel a lot of accountability for the team you're leaving behind. So you want to be there to also manage the relationship of, the manager that they're used to having to this new manager coming in. Any sort of questions, because you are so deep into it, not knowing that there might be something that you don't even realize is a question. So just being available. And then you get to slowly offer.
Do you feel guilt?
Oh, deep guilt, for sure. For sure. And then having to come back to the same team almost 2 years later and be like, oh, hey guys, I'm pregnant again, right? And watching the faces, right? And, that to me is a good reflection of, oh, like I am making an impact and people are feeling an absence in a good way. So you feel good about it. Everybody wants to feel wanted and needed, right? So you like that reaction versus the team going like, yes, they're leaving, right? So that's a great reaction, but also you feel like it's such a substantive amount of change that you're putting your team through. I did it once and now I'm doing it again, but you learn from the first round as well. And I think that's the kind of key part of where you have that continued employment with an organization. Lots of learnings from the first round of what went really well, could have been better, what was kind of status quo in terms of, the things in the way that they turned out. But I think in terms of just answering that question of how do you find that role is like for myself, it was postings. Our mobility network and the ecosystem is strong. So you put out feelers. I think you have preferences through your own networks as well of who you think could be a good fit, because there's not only about the role, but also culture, management, style, all that kind of stuff. And then the interview process was the same. And then the idea of, there will be hopefully some crossover at the end too, if possible, so that the transition can happen otherwise. But yeah, hopefully that kind of acknowledges that kind of full circle of prepping, posting, and then interviewing and getting that set up.
Okay, and Carl, you're in the middle of this. I mean, it was 4.5 or 5 months ago, whatever, that you sort of went on your maternity leave. So that's fresh in the memory. Although I appreciate lots of other things have happened in the period since then. But also, it's not long now till you go back. So in your case, what did you do? What sort of person did you recruit somebody in to take over your role, or was it reassigned internally at Cisco?
I won't say it was a recruited kind of effort, and I won't say it was a reassignment formally. It was a discussion that we as leadership had, kind of looking at what the team was going to be working on, where we were at as a company, as an organization. I sit in the HR function, people and communities at Cisco. And we had a lot of important work happening while I was out. And so we wanted to kind of pick the best individual that could help the team further along. I'm super thankful to have a very, very kind of self-reliant team, if you will. They manage kind of the program for me and have done so, extremely well while I've been out this time around. So all credit to them. But it wasn't anything formal. It was just what I think made sense for us was having somebody that brought that leadership role that I would be filling or voiding. And so the individual that is covering for me is my senior director, and it gives the team that leadership role, but still allows them the autonomy to continue on and do what they're doing, and have always done, whether it be for me or for my cover.
Okay. And Elaine, bringing you into the conversation, I mean, you know, you're doing or have done quite a few maternity covers, and you're interacting with obviously the mothers who are on maternity leave. How often and how do you go about contacting them? Because I'm just wondering that you've got, you know, obviously a mother who is not working. The whole point of maternity leave is to do the maternity stuff. And they don't want to be bothered with everything going on about the role. But equally, if there's something important, it's still their job and they might want to know about it. So when do you sort of shoot them an email or pick up the phone? And when do you think, actually, I should be leaving them in peace? You know, it's not my job to bother them about stuff. How do you manage that?
It's a balance. And I think you need to establish early on during that handover period, you know, how much do you want to know? How do you want to be contacted? But that's fluid as well. That can change kind of post-baby. You don't know how that individual is going to feel. So I think it's important to check in as well after the baby is born. You know, is this still about right? And it's the type of communication as well. You certainly don't want to be, you know, emailing and texting questions. I think it's the, you know, what form of communication are you talking about? I think it's perhaps the more valuable communication is, okay, you know, if business strategy has changed, you know, some important kind of changes within the organization, within the team, then I think it's important to keep that individual up to date. And then perhaps communication can increase up to running up to the point where the individual is returning, so that they're, you know, bring them back into the fold and it's not such of a shock to the system when they return. And I think as the person who's covering, you've got to bring that empathy. You know how emotional.
Keyword, empathy, absolutely. Yeah. It's a very emotional time, let's face it. Yeah.
And, you know, I've been a mother, you know, I've had maternity leave myself, and I know what it's like to return to work. You lose
I'm just loving all these cute baby pics. It's just, I tell you, this show, I just got a smile on my face all the time. It's just gorgeous. Oh, bless him.
My kids are older. They've just come back from school just now. They would cringe if they knew that their pictures were up on LinkedIn right now. So apologies to my children. No, but I think you really, it's an emotional time. I know, you know, you could lose confidence during that period. You know, so much has changed. So as the person who's covering, you really need to keep that in mind. And it's emotional for the person covering as well. You know, the last position I had, you know, ideally, you know, you kind of 6 months into the job, you think, oh, I really like this. Actually, I would like to stay. You know, it's the ideal situation.
You want them to come back.
No, yeah.
Oh, you don't want to work here. You want to be a stay-at-home mom.
Yeah. So there's a mix of emotions for both parties.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I might,
Kyle, yeah.
If I might, Brian, I'll add, even on kind of the flip side, not the cover, but the person returning, there are also emotions on our side as well. A lot has changed in the time that we've been away. We have a new member of the family dynamics have changed. And as a new parent coming back, re-entering the workforce, you're also wondering kind of how am I going to approach this? What value am I bringing? The team has managed well for the last X amount of months. But where do I add value? And for me, I think one of the things that I asked myself coming off of my first maternity leave was, if I am going to be spending time away from my baby, I want to make sure that I'm adding real value. I'm not just doing this to kind of check a box. And that kind of prompted me to rearrange and rethink my career trajectory, which was also kind of directly correlated to the promotion that I got coming off of maternity leave the first time. This time around, it's what value do I bring? You know, a lot is changing in the United States in terms of the political landscape affecting the immigration program. Where can I really continue to distinguish myself? Because we know the program has managed really well the last almost 6 months. I'm not, you know, the value I add in that day-to-day regard isn't as kind of important as the value I would bring if I was to look at something else. And so that's, even though we're on maternity leave, I will say my brain has not stopped. Yes, I'm tracking kind of feeds and diapers and sleep and wake windows and all that fun stuff. But I am also kind of thinking, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for the team when I return?
So a couple of questions I'd like to, Carl and also Sandeep, just get your views on. The first is, when you're on maternity leave, how do you keep yourself technically up to date? Because, obviously everything is changing in our world. Immigration laws change. We've just seen in the last week, tax laws change. And if you're out for 18 months or 6 months, when you come back, there will be change. And, you're not focused on technical stuff. How do you keep yourself technically up to date? And the other question I wanted to ask, which is like the flip side to the conversation I had with Elaine, is what guardrails do you set when you're going off on maternity leave? I mean, do you say to your replacement, don't contact me unless, and I know in your case, for example, at Cisco, you've had a big acquisition. I mean, is that something that, you needed to be aware of? I mean, just so tell me the two questions then. I suppose the first is, what rules do you set or guidelines do you set? And then secondly, how do you keep yourselves up to date? Carl, do you want to give?
Yeah, sure. In terms of rules and guidelines, I've been a lot better this time around on my second maternity leave of really kind of disconnecting. I recognize that we get a generous parental leave benefit at Cisco, and I wanted to make sure that I really kind of poured into that because I know when I go back, it's going to be boots on the ground and I'm going to be kind of really needing to focus on my work. And so I didn't want to kind of feel the pull in both directions during maternity leave. But I did let my team know that if there was anything that I needed to know, bad news doesn't get better. So let me know right away, even when I'm out, especially in regards to kind of personnel decisions. So if there was a team member that was leaving or a team member that was thinking of, something else, I would be happy to chat with them and happy to talk to them. And so that has been a priority that I communicated. And then in terms of keeping up to date, on kind of technical developments, I've just exercised kind of my own judgment. I know what we're entering into as a country and kind of where we're going. And I've kind of listened and kept a ear out for kind of those developments. I mean, you can't go anywhere in the United States today without hearing about kind of birthright citizenship or the actions at the border regarding deportation, et cetera, et cetera. But I will say things like last week, Fragman hosted a wonderful panel on kind of the impact of the Trump administration and some of those early actions. I tuned into that, and I actually sent our Fragman partner a picture of my 4.5-month-old playing on her gym with my phone and the live stream on. So I'm essentially training her very early, but it was helpful just to be able to kind of start to think about the impacts. And I've let people know that if there's anything that I need to know, you need to let me know. And I will say my team has been very, very gracious in kind of respecting those boundaries. People always feel kind of, oh, should I be texting you? And I'm happy to chat, even, it doesn't have to necessarily be about work, because it is helpful to think of other things other than baby stuff. So.
I think you were saying earlier that had this been a show just about mobility policy or something, you would have been disconnected, but you're here because this is such an important subject personally.
Yeah,
everybody.
I wouldn't have given up my time to talk about a policy or to talk about lump sum versus core flex. I wouldn't have done that.
I sort of get that. Fascinating though they are, but I sort of get that. Sandy, what about you? Did you set guidelines or rules when you were going on maternity leave? And similarly, when you're on cover now, have you agreed rules with the person that you're standing in for?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you have to strike a balance of the type of person you want to be while you're on maternity leave, right? And I think that's a valid self-reflection moment you want to take. And what I mean by that is there's no right or wrong way. You can continue to stay connected. You can be fully disconnected. You could find something in the middle. You may not even know what type of maternity leave person or paternity leave person you're going to be. And that was the biggest part for me, was not knowing it. But what I did know was that I wanted to soak myself into being a first-time mom and the second-time mom as well, but also knowing that my career is very important and knowing that changes happen and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what I did was I chose to take control of that. And so really the messaging was, I've got 4 weeks of transitionary period. We're going to give you all the tools, and yes, I'll be available as needed. And same to my team as well. But really my focus was for me to control the check-in points. And so I actually let them know, like, hey, heads up, I might be reaching out to you quarterly, maybe more frequently, maybe infrequently, but I'll be the one to check in. But in the event, similar to Kyle, there's something substantive, personnel changes, any sort of big, massive changes that will really shake up the makeup of either the role or the company, then please do let me know. I'm not one that does well being totally absent and then coming back to this totally new organization. I like to be part of the change. But I think like being on this sort of leave, the challenge is you don't feel like you have as much control, because you have to give respect to the person who's also covering your maternity leave. And so if decisions are being made or if changes are happening, there's one thing to know, but there's another struggle knowing that you may not be able to influence the way you once did. And so I think you have to come to terms with what you will even do with that information. And so for me, I think I really wanted to take the time to really soak in the idea that my baby will never be a newborn, a 1-month-old, a 3-month-old, a 6-month-old, and I will never be able to soak in this time. So that was very important to me. And I say this, but I did notice for the first 6 months, I was on Slack, I was on emails, I was reading through stuff, I was keeping my own tabs on things, which helped me stay on top of any sort of legislation changes or policy changes or industry changes, as well as something that was happening in my organization. But I remember having a moment at 6 months when my baby just looked so much bigger, and I was like, what am I doing? And that was it. Like I stopped checking in, I stopped looking into things, and I really took time to like be that maternity leave mom who's all in and do your, stereotypical, mommy and me fitness classes, go out with the other moms for like a brunch with the baby and really enjoy that period of time. So I think it's just a matter of knowing yourself and knowing that time is of the essence and it's so precious. And I think once you have kids, it becomes more and more about that, right? And really where you want to allocate your energy. And to Kyle's point about if my 4-month-old is not going to be with me right now, it better be worth it. And that becomes much more prominent even after you've had kids and you return to work.
Okay, we're getting up to towards the close of the show. We've got a couple minutes left. But Carl, I wanted to bring you back into the conversation. First of all, you're coming back to work in just 6 weeks' time, or different work, depending how you look at it. But you're coming back to employment with Cisco in just 6 weeks' time. How do you go about that? What's your plan for reintegrating at work? And I need this sort of 2-minute. And I know there's some really good books that you've been talking about that we want to sort of just mention on the show. So tell us a bit about your return to work plan.
So my return to work plan is actually starting tomorrow. I am having my first live chat with my manager who has been covering for me, just to get a feel for what's going on. I think 6 weeks is a good time, and that's a personal decision for me to kind of start to refocus in the direction of work. But also to say that I know going back, the next 6 months are not going to be the same. And I'm not going to hold myself to that standard that I had prior to going on maternity leave. I think working mothers, working parents deserve a lot of grace. And so if there's anything that I leave everyone with, it's as parents, as team members, extend that grace. Maternity leave is one of the leaves that people can take. There are all sorts of leaves available, whether it be kind of disability, health related. Maternity leave just gives you a little peek into how a company kind of treats employees stepping away, but employees can step away for a variety of reasons. So lots of grace. And then in terms of book recommendations, there's one book that I highly recommend. It's called The Fifth Trimester by Lauren Smith Brody. It's a really good reference book on kind of how to return to the workforce. She kind of calls out things that you wouldn't think about, like taking and blocking off from 2 o'clock onwards on Halloween, your calendar to get kids ready to go trick-or-treating. Never thought about that before becoming a mother. Totally recognize the importance of that going forward. And even if you aren't a mother, there are, like I said earlier, a whole village of people that support us, whether that be our direct managers or not. And I think as working mothers, that's kind of our responsibility to make other people aware of the challenges that we face. And so blocking that time off, whether it be Halloween, Christmas, whatever, child's school performance, it's important to communicate that to people that you are bringing your whole self to this role.
We could talk about this for hours and hours and hours, but sadly we are out of time. I'm going to bring back on to stage Cara Butler from Benevo, Julie Onslow, Cole. Julie unfortunately had to run to a meeting, and of course our wonderful producer tally. It's been an amazing show. Thank you so much for giving up your time. Thank you to Elaine. Thank you to Sandeep. Especially thank you to Kyle doing it during your time on parental leave. Many thanks to Cara. Many thanks to Julia. This has been The View from the Top. We are back next week when we're going to be talking about the revolutionary new immigration management hub. Trust me, if you have people who you need to look after them for their visas, their work permits, and they're not on program, they might be just local hires. This is a really important subject, and it's going to be fascinating next week. But I probably shouldn't say this, but fascinating though it will be next week. This is the show that's stolen my heart. And all those baby pics and all those stories, ladies, you are all...
We needed 2 hours, Brian. How could we squeeze it into 1 hour? That was impossible.
I know. We're going to have to return to this subject. There's so much to talk about. Anyway, thank you, everybody. This has been The View from the Top. I'm your host, Brian Freeman. Thank you, everybody, and have a great week. And we'll see you this time next week. Take care, everybody.
Bye.